So it is November 8th, 2023. We're at the monthly general meeting of the Culver City Democratic Club. Our guest tonight is Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon. DA Gascon, the floor is yours. Thanks for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff, and thanks everyone for making time. What I like to do is, first of all, this is really a conversation, so feel free to interrupt at any time. I'm going to give you kind of a sort of an overview of kind of a midterm report, if you will, which is now almost 3 years since I've been in office. And then, just really entertain any questions that any of you may have. But to give you kind of a quick recap where we are today, and sort of, I'm going to jump back and forth. When I became the district attorney, as you all know, there was a series of promises that I made during the campaign that, they were the basis of my campaign, and frankly, why I was elected and why many of you supported the work. And I felt very strongly that it was important for me to, right off the gate, begin to do the work that I had promised that I was going to do. And often people make comments about, look, you're going too fast, or there should be more, you should be more gradual about the way you're doing this. You need to get more consensus. And the reality is that I entertain being coming in a much more gradual way. But the reality was that from the very beginning, I knew that we were facing a great deal of opposition to the work, primarily because for the traditionalists in this line of work, much of what we're trying to do is so foreign to them, right? The definition of public safety in our communities for generations now has been one of extreme incarceration, one of extreme punishment. And I think that we as a nation, in the last 40 years or so, sort of, increasingly became more and more punitive without really having any visible results for that. And we became an outlier when compared to other nations similar to us. And the opposition was so brutal from the very beginning that I knew that if I waited, all it was going to do was going to delay reforms that I felt that was very necessary. So, one of the questions that I often ask people, especially those that say, well, you went too fast. And I say, well, where should we have sort of taken a little longer? Should I have continued to do death penalty cases and put more people of color in death row in a path that we know that not only doesn't work, but it becomes completely unfair and so racist in its application, and it's so expensive, and it doesn't create any more safety? And generally the answer that I'll get is no. And then I said, okay, so should we put children into adult prisons? We could go on for another year or so, put another 200 or 300 kids in adult prison. And the answer to that is immediately, well, no. Okay. Should I look the other way when there is an unlawful use of excessive force by the police? And maybe somebody gets killed, but we'll wait until the next killing. And the answer to that was no. So by the time that we went through this conversation, it becomes very obvious to me and to others as well. It seems like everything that we started doing initially was so important, it was important to do it from the get-go. But the reality is that when I did, I immediately started to face a recall. And, we've gone through 2 recalls that we were able to beat, even though people have spent over $10 million trying to get me out of office. And the reason why I believe that we were successful in beating the recalls, and if you notice, I use we and us because this is really a movement of our community. I'm only one of you, and the work that I'm doing is the work that I was elected to do by you all, is that the community stood up and supported the work, because I think most of us felt that this was important work and that we needed to shift the way that we deliver public safety. And then we were in the middle of COVID, and crime started going up in 2020 before I was even, before I was even sworn into office, or frankly, before I was even elected. But by the time that I got elected, all of a sudden the increases in crime, which by the way were happening all over the nation, all of a sudden became they were blamed on the policies, which we knew from the get-go that that wasn't the case. In fact, even the increases that we were having in our community were substantially less per capita that were happening in other communities around us, like Riverside, San Bernardino, Kern County, or, frankly, other states that have very punitive approaches to the work. And they were experiencing even higher rates of crime increases and violence than we were. So we knew that we were not the cause. But interestingly enough, what has happened now in the last year or so, starting with mid-2022 and certainly by the end of 22 and 23, is that crime has started to go down at very rapid rates. The reduction in homicides and violence is going back again to historic levels. And again, while crime has been going down around the country, in our community, actually per capita has gone down more rapidly than many of the communities that have a different approach to the work, a more traditional approach to the work, which it speaks to the point that the policies were not creating the increases in crime. And now we're seeing that crime is starting to become stable again, primarily because so much of what was going on with COVID is wearing out. But what we are doing and are continuing to do is not only doing the work in a more thoughtful way, but we're holding ourselves accountable in ways that the office was never held accountable before. So when it comes, for instance, to police accountability, we have approximately 115 cases where we're prosecuting law enforcement officers for on-duty misconduct, lying, providing false testimony, or 15 of those cases actually using excessive force, which when you compare the history of the office in the prior 20 years under two separate administrations, there were 2 cases filed for excessive force. Here we are now, we filed 15. When you look at the way that we're handling environmental justice, for instance, we're dealing with cases, especially one involving allied metals, which is a metal recycler that has been poisoning the water and the soil adjacent to Jordan High School for years, which is a school, by the way, that is mostly attended by very vulnerable, poor kids. And the office had walked away from that case for years. Not only did we file the case, but we filed the case also going after the principals, because just simply filing a case against a corporation is like back to doing business as usual. It's cost of business. We also created a wage justice unit because we know that wage theft in our county exceeds $1 billion. If you want to talk about theft crimes in our county and our community, probably the biggest ripoff every year is the money that some unscrupulous employers are taking away from our workers. And that has an impact on all of us, by the way. Some people say, well, that only impacts the worker, maybe. Well, but it doesn't, because what you're talking about underpaying taxes. You're talking about underpaying into workers' compensation, fund. You're talking about, this employees that are being victimized. They often cannot afford to have housing. They cannot afford to have medical care, so they end up in emergency rooms that we all pay for it. And then finally, for the good employers that are playing by the rules, they're often underbid, and they cannot compete with the people that are not paying their fair wages. So it has a system-wide impact on all of us, in addition to the fact that they're stealing directly from the poor people that are working sometimes, very long hours, and not being compensated accordingly. And we've done this very aggressively. We've actually looking now at the potential that, we have some hotels that allegedly are hiring folks that were recent refugees to our community to break a strike, which again, impacts the capacity of doing our work. At the same time, we're addressing the traditional crime like violence. We have put a tremendous amount of effort in prosecuting violence. We created our community violence reduction teams. We're deploying with police agencies around the county where it's necessary. And we're putting some very good cases together against people that are harming us. And when we began to see the national increase in smash and grabs, we call them organized retail theft, we immediately move all those cases to our organized crime unit, because we recognize that what was driving the majority of these crimes is the fact that people can sell the stuff on digital marketplaces like Facebook, Amazon, eBay, and other places. And this is a national problem. And we have put a lot of effort in this, working with the LAPD and many of the other agencies around the county. And we're actually happy to say now, not only are we putting many cases together, but we're beginning to see a slowing down of the smash and grabs. And we believe that eventually they will be evaded. So in summary, we are doing all the traditional work that a prosecutor's office does, and we're doing it in a way that is thoughtful and responsible. We're holding people accountable, but we're also doing the things that are not traditional, like going after those that are stealing for workers, going after polluters, going after other people that are harming our community in really significant ways, and often with no consequences at all. And all this, and crime is going down in our community. And that, I think, is a testament to our work, both as a community and the people in my office that are, the ones that are committed to doing the work in this new, different way. And I believe that we are getting to a place that is only going to get better with time. And we're creating a different culture in my office. I've hired now over 85 new prosecutors that are coming to our office because they want to do the work the way we're doing it. And interestingly enough, these are younger prosecutors that are coming already from working other DA's offices around the area. So these are people that are coming here. They already had a job, but they are coming here because they want to do the work the way that we're doing it, which really speaks volumes about the development of a different culture in the office, which at the end of the day, that's really what we're hoping to do. We're hoping to get to a place where this not be driven by a particular individual, but it's just simply the way that we do business, because this is the future of prosecutions. And quite frankly, I believe the future of public safety in our community. I tell you all this, and I also tell you that there are some significant challenges. We have a tremendous problem with mental health in our community. And we have a tremendous problem with fentanyl use and other drugs. And in the area of fentanyl, we put a task force together, and we decided to depart from the traditional stuff, just strictly law enforcement. We have a law enforcement component, but we brought in county health, we're bringing in school districts, and we're bringing in community, and we're bringing in victims, people that have lost a loved one to the use of fentanyl, because we want to make sure that our solutions are holistic in the way that we approach the work. We don't want to go back to the 80s and 90s on the war on drugs, but we want to address this. But I tell you what is really worrisome about this whole idea of the mental health and substance abuse problems that we're having. We have people today that are severely mentally ill, that are being impacted by the use of some of these narcotics that are very powerful. And some of these chemicals will impact your neural system for the rest of your life. And we have not thought about how to do a continuity of care for people that are going to be impaired, if not for a very long time, possibly for the rest of their lives. So it's a challenge that we have to address. I know that our board of supervisors are very committed to care first and to adding the number of mental health beds that are available, but we have to really, as a community, we have to start being more intentional about how we plan to deal with this for the future. And I'm going to stop here, and I want to hear your questions and your comments, and I'd love to engage in this conversation.
Thank you so much. So if anyone has a question or a discussion they want to start, please raise your Zoom hand and I'll call on you in order. Danny Young, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Gascon. Thank you for being here. I just want to let you know that I am hugely appreciative of your approach. I have a lot of respect for you, and I can't tell you how grateful I am that you take the attitude of just getting stuff done and not sort of waiting for like some sort of consensus to emerge in terms of like what is appropriate or whatever, because it's just, there's just too many roadblocks to ever getting anything done. And I think the results are there. So I'm just really proud of that. And I just wanted to say thank you. There's a sense, I guess, the perception is just sort of colloquially in like what I'll call like the AM radio listening crowd, that people can't be arrested for stealing things anymore, or they say like if you don't take $1,000, $950 worth of merchandise from a store, the police will not arrest you, and if they do, nothing's going to happen to you. You'll just be back out on the street or whatever. I don't want to frame it too much, but I'm wondering if you're aware of that sense and like how you respond to that sort of attitude that's out there.
Yeah, Danny, first of all, thank you so much for your question, because you're absolutely right. I think that often this narrative, by the way, is being fed by unfortunately, by some members of law enforcement. The reality is that a theft under $950 in California is a misdemeanor, and the misdemeanor is punishable for, up to and including 6 months in county jail. And the reason why I say 6 months is because when you committed non-serious non-violent crime, which will be a misdemeanor, you do 50% of the time. So if you were to get a year in jail, you're looking at 6 months of actual time. And when people are stealing multiple times in similar fashion, even if it's under $950, that can also be prosecuted as a felony. Additionally, sometimes there are other charges that could be brought up, especially if it's an organized process where you have multiple people participating, you have conspiracy. But going back to just straight out the misdemeanor theft, it is a crime, and it is a crime that can be prosecuted for, and people can be held accountable proportionally to what occurred. What you often hear is people saying, well, nothing is going to happen, therefore I'm not going to make the arrest, or I'm not, is not based on the reality. Now, for people that perhaps we want to see somebody maybe that has committed a misdemeanor or going to prison for decades, well, yeah, that's not going to happen. That will be disproportionate to the level of the offense. But the reality is that it is a crime. People can be arrested for it. They can be prosecuted, and we do prosecute these cases. Now, sometimes, the outcome of the case in terms of punishment may be deemed by some as not being, punitive enough. And some of this has to do with the reality also of what we are as a system. Our county jail continues to be full. So we have a situation where our county sheriff has to release people sometimes early because they don't have any space. And that impacts the lower level crimes. They may get released sooner than people that have committed more serious crimes. Also, often people that commit this low level offenses, they get arrested. By the time they actually get prosecuted and they get sentenced, they have served their time because they were in pretrial confinement for a period of time. So there are many factors that can impact the final outcome of the prosecution of somebody for a very low level offense. And, we have to be very thoughtful about how we use court space and how do we use jury time. It's also economies of the system, right? When we drag 12 people to sit at a jury, that starts with, first of all, we have to go through, we have to go through 40, 50 people in order to identify 12 people that can sit on the jury box. It takes a lot of us away from work. It takes a lot of us away from doing all the other things that we have to do. Unless you're a government employee, usually you're not going to get paid for going to jury duty. So we're mindful of all these things, but putting all that aside, yes, they can be arrested, and they do get arrested, and yes, they can be prosecuted, and they get prosecuted proportionally to the offense. And when you hear people say, well, I'm not going to make the arrest, or nothing is going to happen, it's really a disconnection from what the work needs to happen. And in fact, one of the conversations I always have with police officers is, your job is to conduct a good investigation. If appropriate, make the arrest, let the system do their part. But when you don't make the arrest, you don't do a good investigation, then the rest of the system cannot do their part. I say often, a prosecutor cannot prosecute an empty chair, right? There has to be a defendant there, and that has to be there because a person was arrested and a good investigation was conducted. And the level of crime is not really the issue, is being able to have the opportunity to hold people accountable.
Great, thank you. Gina?
I told you I was going to save a question. So I understand, like right now, I think generally the sense I'm getting with the public is a narrative that's being driven by the media. So of course, turning on the news, smash and grab, this happened, that happened. We have a lot of different issues going on that it makes it feel that crime has actually is at an all-time high. And I know that that's a strategy that's been used since before I've been alive. So I kind of want to know, is there like do you have like a graphic or something that can be shared to show that actually no, numbers are trending down? Because I think that that is going to be one of the only ways that people, like supporters of you, will be able to like counteract this narrative of like, oh my God, crime's so high, look at all these smash and grabs and look at all this stuff. And unfortunately, as much as I want to go beat those kids in the head because I have no idea how much they're resetting progress anyway, I just really want to have something to show very simply that, hey, no, actually crime's going down and here's the data. Like, I know what the news says, but here's data.
Yes, we do have that information, Gina, and what I can do, I don't know if Jeff, if it will be appropriate to get you some of that data so you can share with the club at a later date. Also, I think I have Elise Moore is with us, and Felice, if you're there, maybe if you can share the LA Times article that was published about 10-15 days ago that talks about in general the what the crime numbers are. We can share that link with you, but Gina, but if you want to get more details, I can do that as well. Also, by the way, I don't know whether the Culver City Police Department does that, but I know that the LAPD, for instance, they publish their crime numbers every month, and you can follow by police station, and you can see the different crimes, and it has year-to-date comparisons. It has all violent crime, all property crimes. So, you can see that. I mean, I can tell you, actually, if you look at those numbers in general, and they're reflective of the national numbers, the things that are going continue to go up, and there's some explanations for it. I think, number one, car theft is really skyrocketing nationally. And what we're finding out is that increasingly young people are, they're TikTokers that are actually doing TikTok videos about how to steal certain cars that are really easy. And when I was a young kid, we remember there were certain cars that were easy to steal. And then we got into the 90s and the early 2000s, the older Toyotas and Nissans were easier to steal. Right now, it seems to be Kias and the Hyundais, especially the older ones. So they're actually showing kids how to steal them. And what we're seeing is the cars are being stolen for joyriding, and they're being dumped. They're not even being stripped. They're not necessarily being used in other crimes. And I'm talking about the majority. Obviously, people commit crimes, they steal cars, but the sort of the wave of car theft, it seems to be driven by social media more than anything else. The other thing that has gone up is organized retail theft, right? The smash and grab. Again, national numbers. And we're dealing with those, and I think that is driven, quite frankly, by the digital marketplaces, right? It used to be that if you stole stuff and you wanted to fence it, you had to go to a swap meet. You stole it from the trunk of a car in a parking lot. Now you can just go to Facebook, you can go to Amazon, you can go to eBay, and many other ways. So there are ways that it's easy to monetize the stolen property in larger quantities. So we're working with retailers also to alter business models in order to make it more difficult for this to occur, as well as to protect the store and the customers and the employees that are working in the store. So those are the areas where we've seen sort of some increases that are stubbornly high, and we kind of understand why. Most of the other stuff is really going down. So again, if you're like in LAPD, you can see them. I'm not sure Culver City, but I can get numbers for you guys as well. And hopefully, if Elise can put that link there for you guys, you'll guys be able to see it as well.
Oh yeah, she did. Thank you. I just was saying more so like, back to social media, catching, like having like graphics, posted, because that's what's going to really like help drive that narrative, is like being able to say, here's this one graphic, because, unfortunately people don't read. I wish they did.
Gina, why don't we do this? I'm going to post my email address, should be an email, and I'm going to connect you with my crime analyst, and we're going to get some numbers for you that you can do graphics and stuff like that. I'll put it in now, so and you guys, you can all use it. Obviously, let me see. Okay, why am I not allowed to get, oh, here we go. Okay,
Thank you so much.
sure, my pleasure, thank you.
Yes, and thanks for everyone for putting all that info in the chat. We do have the Culver City reports in there, and Elise got the LA Times story, and yeah, a lot of good stuff. And if you do ever want to send us anything for our newsletter, we do a monthly newsletter that's
Yeah, we'll send you some stuff, Chief. Also, I'll connect you with Tiffany Blacknell, and we will send you stuff. But I'm also, like I said, Gene, if you want more details too, shoot me an email. I'll connect you with our crime analyst, and we can feed you, the data that we have for Culver City, the county. We can do it we have almost every city. And by the way, the data that we get is from the police departments and the FBI. We don't create data. We just basically take their data and we put it out there. So.
thank you, Tad.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hello, District Attorney Gascon. Point one, it's nice to see a man with even more impressive silver hair than my own.
And it's pixelating all over my screen here, although I don't
right.
There is
We're
no
both not unknown for that.
Yeah.
Also, I just wanted to say hello again because I'm also on the board of Southern California Americans for Democratic Action. I'm actually the new president of the C3 arm. So you recall that we just had you on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I do.
So thank you for getting out into the community.
Absolutely.
So, District Attorney, I don't follow issues of law and order and crime as closely as I might. So I don't know as much about this issue that I want to toss at you as I might. But nevertheless, every time I hear about it, it just makes my blood boil. And it is wage theft. Low paid workers. Often it's hard physical labor. And these employers find some way to cheat them out of the little bit of money that they're owed. And it is, I think we all can know sort of intuitively that this probably happens with greater frequency to undocumented workers.
Yes.
As these sons of bitch employers know that undocumented people often don't speak English very well, and they're just kind of afraid constantly about their status. So if they get cheated, they don't do anything about it. So I just want to toss that issue at you and see if you have any thoughts. Is there something you're doing about wage theft and something you can do? And it just how widespread it is, I don't know, but just the injustice of it is so severe that I want to encourage you to try to track down those monsters who engage in such behavior. Thank you.
So absolutely, Ted, and thank you for the question. We are, I created actually the first, I believe is the first in the nation, by the way, and we said that no one has challenged it, so I think it's true. Certainly the first in California. We created a wage theft justice unit, and we're prosecuting cases involving wage theft. We actually just recently, and I encourage you to do a quick Google search. We just filed a case last week against a particular employer in Catalina Island who for about 15 years has been stealing from probably hundreds of workers. And this particular family owns a hotel, and they own 3 restaurants in Catalina Island. And we file multiple counts. We have 18 victims so far, current and former employees. We believe that is just conservatively speaking, over $1 million in wage theft that have occurred. In this particular case, as individuals have employees working maybe 8-hour shift in one of their businesses and then go and work in another business. Anything over 8 hours, they were being paid cash, and often they were putting it under different names. They would not be pay overtime, and then if people refuse because they are also a major landlord in the island, they would evict people. So basically almost an indentive servitude type of setup. That was just about a week ago, November the 2nd, we filed that case. Prior to that,
I did see that in the LA Times, by the way, so I'm glad to hear that you're on it.
So we did then also, that was our case, by the way. with the labor commissioner. Prior to that, about now 2 months ago, we filed a case against two garment manufacturing companies that were stealing from workers. Major cases. By the way, in all these cases, not only are we filing against the corporations, which is a traditional way that if any of this stuff happens, we're also going after the principals, because we know that, again, some of these companies, if you just go after the company, they view it as a cost of doing business. So we're going personally after the principals. And about less than a year ago, we also went after a janitorial company. They have primarily, actually most of them women, that were working in a lot of these large buildings at nighttime, and they were not paying overtime. And when people were refusing to work, if they were not being paid overtime, they would be terminated from employment. And as you well pointed out, Ted, most of these are workers that are in very vulnerable places. Usually they're undocumented, or they're financially so vulnerable that they're afraid of losing their work. So we are very aggressively pursuing these cases. Also recently, I'm sure that the hotel workers have been under strike now for now several months, and there's an allegation that some of the hotels were hiring recently arrived refugees to sort of be strike breakers. We're investigating these cases because we're being told that some of these workers that are being used to sort of, be the strike breakers are also not being paid overtime. Maybe they're being paid under other names again. So we're taking this work very seriously. And by the way, I know that you don't know what the scope of the problem in the county is. It is estimated in LA County is probably over $1 billion a year that are stolen from the local economy, from workers. And also, when you're stealing from workers, you're also not paying payroll taxes. You're not paying workers' comp. You're not paying, many other fees that also go into the general economy. And then finally, as I mentioned before, the good employers, the ones that are playing by the rules, then they're at a competitive disadvantage because they cannot compete with people that are not paying their fair share of this, into the system. So we are aggressively, and we have a unit now that is dedicated to do this work only.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Just if you'll indulge me, just a 15-second follow-up. Terrific answer, District Attorney. And I guess I just want to encourage you to think imaginatively, I bet you have already, about outreach. For every case you just identified to me, there's probably 100 that you don't know about and I don't know about. And the more you can find a way to communicate with those lady janitors who speak hardly any English, working at night, and let them know that they got rights and that you're there to protect their rights. Maybe, again, I'm just thinking out loud, ads on Spanish language radio stations seems to me like an obvious route for that kind of thing. Let those people know that you got their back. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Pat. And just to add a very quick point to that, we're working with nonprofits that are generally working to help immigrant employees with, immigration and other things. And also we're working with, organized labor, because organized labor has a vested interest in dealing with this problem, because it impacts their members as well, right? They're being undercut. So we are definitely touching many different touch points, but you're absolutely right that we need to continue to be creative in our outreach, because some of those folks are very afraid of coming forward.
Thanks. Let's go to Cynthia Hart.
Sorry. You mentioned mental health, and I was interested in the impact of the new care courts, which I think some people are concerned that it may just lead to more incarceration of the mentally ill. How do you see that impacting your work, if at all?
Yeah, Cynthia, good question. And I mean, I'm going to begin by saying that care courts are civil, so we're not involved in it. So it's a civil conservatorship process, right? but very globally, I'll tell you that the way it gets initiated by a family member or a practitioner, or it could be a law enforcement officer. The case goes in front of a court, and it's supposed to be a specialized court that will only deal with these cases. And the goal is to really create, sort of a warm handoff of the person that is in need, hopefully into services, and objectively to try to get them to take their medications and get the services that they need. Now, the question, and I think a question that kind of, I believe that you're sort of asking in a way, is the issue of the conservatorships, and could this get to a place where their excessive uses of sort of the police state, if you will, in controlling people. I think it's too early to say. I think this is a process that is still at the very early stages of the sort of the evolution of this. I think that there are many people in the system that are very keen in not making the mistakes that we made back in the 60s and 70s and before. A lot of our mental health system was broken. I mean, it was sort of broken down, if you will, because people were worried about the abuses of people being held against their will for extended periods of time, almost in a jail-like setting, without the protections of the Constitution and all that stuff, because it was not a criminal process. And the goal, if you may recall, or you may not, but the goal was to, the Lanterman Act was supposedly eliminate those big institutions and create community-based services. The problem is that the big institutions were eliminated, but the community-based services were never created. So the jails became the de facto mental health institutions, and that's taken us to where we are today. I think we all are going to have to work through this to make sure that people's rights are protected, but also that people that are severely disabled are getting the care that they need. And sometimes that's going to entail that there are people that are not able to make decisions for themselves, right? And the question is going to be, how do you balance people's civil rights and the rights to everybody else? And so it's complicated, but I think that the intentions of the care court are good intentions. I think we just have to make sure that the intentions are become the deeds, and like what do they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We just have to make sure that we navigate that. But I believe that that there's enough out there today that hopefully the mistakes that were made in the past are not being made. But again, it's not a criminal process, it's a civil process.
Thanks. Leah Pressman, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering, in terms of crimes that are often against women, like domestic violence, if you're taking a different approach to those kind of crimes.
Leah, it's a yes and no. Let me tell you where it's a no, and then I'm going to tell you where it's a yes. When it comes to prosecuting the cases of the abusers, we're as aggressive as we've ever been. In fact, if you look at our filing rates, both for misdemeanor and felony domestic violence, are not only consistent with the past 10 years, but in some cases are even higher. Where there is a no is that we want to make sure that we don't double victimize the victim, right? Often prosecutors get so wrapped around the idea of prosecuting the offender that they forget to take care of the victim. And let me give you a perfect example of things that the office used to do that I will not do. It was not uncommon for the office to do what is called a body attachment on a victim that refused to come to court, meaning that they would be put in jail, basically, for refusing to cooperate with the prosecution. And some victims are not ready to cooperate with the prosecution, right? Because they're fearful of being assaulted again. And so we have a path to prosecuting the offender without necessarily having the victim available. And the law allows for that, especially in cases of domestic violence. So we are treating the victims, and I said the women because 99, well, maybe not 99, but about 90% of the victims of domestic violence are going to be women. We're very focused on providing trauma-informed interventions and care for the victim, and dealing with the abuser, understanding that there must be consequences to stop the cycle of violence, because domestic violence is a crime that has a tendency, if there's no accountability, to increase with time, right? So the quicker that we can intervene, the more likely that we are to protect, quite frankly, everyone, the kids, the abuse, and sometimes even the abuser from perhaps going down a path that eventually they do something really horrible where they may end up in prison for an extended period of time.
Yeah, it's really striking how many mass killers have histories of domestic violence.
Yeah,
It's definitely a red flag.
And if you look at it too, if you want to go even further back, most of them were kids that grew up in abusive homes, right? It's a very vicious circle that tends to repeat itself.
Thank you. Megan Sally Wells.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. I'm very much in agreement with the policy that you're championing, not to over incarcerate and to rethink justice. I do think that we've seen some really horrific traffic violence, and oftentimes in traffic violence, it's easy for folks to say that, you know, the person who was excessively speeding, you know, it was just an accident, right? But we've seen some really horrific deaths, and you know, if you're going over 100 miles per hour, I would go so far as to call that a murder. And so I you know, engineers are also to blame for the wide roads, but I wonder how you address that with the sense that, you know, jail isn't necessarily the answer, but justice and deterrence has to happen in these cases.
Yeah, and you know, Megan, this is if you Google some of the stuff now, you're going to see that we are filing murder charges in cases where you have those people that are going over 100 miles an hour, and we are, because it's, you know, frankly, we believe is appropriate. It certainly meets the definition, and we are charging them accordingly. I tell you, actually, it was really more horrific, and this, by the way, it's not only happening in our community, it's happening nationwide. We're seeing, for the first time in years, we're seeing a substantial increase of traffic death. It really kind of started during COVID, and it just really increased. In fact, while other crimes have gone down, as you know, the pandemic has sort of come down, when it comes to traffic death, they have not. And the contrary, they're increasing, and we're seeing very high rates of speed, like you mentioned, 100 miles an hour or more. In fact, you know, we just had 4 young college students, Pepperdine, that were killed recently. We believe that the vehicle was going in excess of 100 miles an hour. We filed that as murder charges. We had another case in Downey where a couple, interestingly enough, the victim man driving the car was an employee of our office. Him and his wife were killed. The vehicle was going in excess of 100 miles an hour. We have another case that you're probably going to hear in the next few days. Another case similarly where there were deaths in a collision, where people were, you know, again, driving way above the speed limit. So we're seeing speed increasingly being a problem in our community, and I think that cars are getting, frankly, faster. And you know, if you look at electric cars are super fast and very quiet. And you know, I think it's a challenge will probably be with us for the few years to come, until we all get into cars that will drive themselves, and then there will be other challenges. God knows what they will be. But we are trying to be very aggressive in our prosecution of those cases. Having said that, we continue to have to address this also through engineering and other things. So we're trying to do public education, and we're trying to get cities to, slow down the speed limits, because prosecutions hold the individual accountable. But in general terms, people don't think when they're driving this fast that they could be prosecuted for killing someone, right? So we're doing it, but I'm fearful that this is not enough, that we have collectively, we need to do a lot more. Frankly, I would love to see car manufacturers being forced to put governors, basically a mechanism in the vehicle, that the vehicle can only go a certain speed and then it wouldn't go any faster. I know some people may say, well, that's like nanny state. But, when you get behind the wheel of a car, or when you own a gun, right, I think you have responsibilities for the rest of us. And I think it's important that we start thinking in other ways to engineer more safety around the use of cars in our community.
Thank you. Shannon Theus?
Hey, so just following up on that, can you give a little bit of insight to the incident that happened on Slauson? Because that's actually along my commute, where a car, I guess, I don't know what happened with the driver, but the car just went instantly really fast and shot into like a gas station. I believe that I remember just seeing stuff like that with your face around in the media, and just your conversation right now just reminded me of the incident. I don't know if you're aware of which one I'm
There's
talking
the
about.
nurse with
That's the
bipolar
Nicole
disorder.
Linton case.
This is the
Yeah.
nurse, the one
Yeah.
that, yeah,
It really did traumatize
Right.
a lot of people in the community. It kind of really did shake us up. And I don't know if we all experienced like the resolution of it, as we did feel the trauma of it.
Yeah, so the case, she was being prosecuted for murder, multiple murders. But the case is now going through the legal process. So it's being litigated. But yeah, she's being prosecuted for murder.
Thank you. Bubba Fish?
Hey, thank you, District Attorney. I'm curious. I've worked on two decriminalized bills through the California legislature this year. One to decriminalize sidewalk cycling on dangerous streets, and another one to decriminalize fare evasion, because if you evade public transit fare 3 times, you can be thrown in jail for up to 90 days. Obviously, both of these crimes were predominantly biased towards Black and brown riders and cyclists, and low-income riders and cyclists. And they were vetoed by the governor, unfortunately. I was curious, like, what crimes are you seeing that I guess are being punished to the fullest extent of the law, more commonly or more often than you think should, and what sort of like a good frontier when thinking about areas that should be decriminalized in legislation? Is there anything that you think, Sacramento should really be doing this? They should really be tackling this issue, because the punishments that are coming through for this crime are extremely arcane.
Yeah, and this is where, again, we have 58 counties, and as you can imagine, the application of the law sometimes from one jurisdiction to another can be very different. Also in LA County, we have 10 cities that have their own city prosecutors for misdemeanors. So also even the posture even of some of the city attorneys may be different, not only from my office, but they may be different from other city attorney's office. So fare evasion, to be honest with you, is not an area that generally police is going to be presenting cases to us in our jurisdiction. However, I don't know if that is the same for, let's say, the city of LA, and whether the city attorney is prosecuting for evasion or not. A lot of this much lower type of crimes are also what we call wavelets. It could be an infraction or they could be a misdemeanor crime. And some of the things are better served through the process of an infraction, which is more like a civil ticket-like approach to the work. So I think it really varies in where you are, what the application of the law and some of these laws are going to be. And to be honest with you, I'm not familiar what some other jurisdictions within the county may be doing for evasion. It's not something that I'm aware that we're being presented. And I know that based on the way that we do our work, if they were being presented to our office, we would probably be trying to sort of peel the onion and try to figure out, do we have a mental health problem? Do we have, some other issues, and try to divert people into other interventions that would be more effective, that quite frankly would be a cycle in and out of jail. Because even though you may say that, they could be punished up to 90 days in jail, this lower level offenses, the sheriff is going to kick them loose immediately because he doesn't have any space for them anyway. So all you're doing is you're creating a criminal record that will have a tendency to impact this person and the ability to do other things, and not necessarily they're not going to be incarcerated, or there's just not going to be there. But sometimes you may be able to address it if it's an issue that they need housing, they need health intervention. There are other things that we can try to do. Those are much more effective.
Thank you. So we'll go back to Danny Young. And Danny, thank you for letting everyone cut in front of you before we looped back.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't want to take up too much time. So thank you for getting back to me, because I just wanted to follow up on something that you touched on earlier in your response to my first question, and that's regarding law enforcement. I'm sure you're familiar with, in San Francisco, they had a similarly nominally progressive DA, and they had all the recalls and all the angry big citywide fight. And I think they did actually get that DA recalled and replaced, and crime has gone up since then, but apparently it just doesn't matter anymore. But anyways, there were a lot of reports at the time that law enforcement in San Francisco were just simply were choosing not to enforce because they disagreed on policy choices. They just decided that they weren't going to, arrest people or do whatever it is they're supposed to do, day-to-day beat cop type stuff. They just were not arresting people or whatever, just as like a sort of police boycott or something along those lines. And are we facing that? Like, do you see that happening here? And if that's the case, like, I mean, to me, that's outrageous, the idea that they would be able to get away with something like that. So what can we even do if individual officers are just saying, well, we don't agree with this, so we're just going to sabotage you, to hopefully get rid of you, basically?
Yeah, organizationally, I don't see it, right? I see the chiefs of police around the county are very very committed to their work, and we haven't seen a work slowdown per se. Now, that's not to say that you may not have a particular officer that may decide, well, I'm not going to do this because I disagree. And you find that in any line of work, right? It would not be only in policing, but as a system-wide problem, I don't see that happening in LA County. To the contrary, I've seen a lot of good police leadership. In fact, you guys in Culver City have had good police leadership, and so I'm not sensing that. And again, I'm not saying that you may not find exceptions to that, but those are more of an individual, maybe taking that approach, as opposed to organizationally people saying we're not going to get our work done. That's not my experience.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone for your questions and comments, and thank you again, DA Gascon. I'm LA County is 10 million people. It's larger than many states and many countries, and so it means a lot to us to have you come and spend time talking to the 30 of us tonight.
No, it's a pleasure, Jeff, and anytime, that's what I'm here for. You're right. We actually, if we were a state, there would only be 8 states that would be larger than us. So we're pretty big. And often, this, which goes to the point that Gina made earlier, but you turn on the news and you see incidents, and people get this disproportionate view of the state of crime. Well, we forget sometimes these stations are reporting in the largest media market in the country, because not only we're reporting LA County, by the way, but we're reporting LA, San Bernardino, Riverside, Orange County. So you have this huge metropolis area, and they're reporting on this, and all of a sudden you see, my God, there was a murder, there was a robbery, and yes, they are, but you're talking about, we're larger than many countries, right? So, where if you're a smaller community, the likelihood of more offenses occurring is less likely. Here we get sort of inundated with a lot of information, but we forget just how big we are and what that really translates in per capita incidents. And when you look at per capita, actually our area is one of the safest in the country, but you would never know it.
Well, thank you again. So I'm going to stop the recording and we'll get into some other business. So again, thank you for coming, and thanks to Elise for setting this all up.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Gina, shoot me an email and I'll make sure I'll hook you up with our crime analysts during the week.
Will do. Thank you so much.